All right now are keeping a very close eye on something happening out there.
Yeah, Brian, we had a tornado warning that for some reason it was a technical issue with all of the computer systems, just wasn't showing up on our radar. But here we go, where it does now show a tornado warning. And this is actually in northern Piscataquis County, so it's in a different spot here. And what we're looking for is, it seems like the National Weather Service has focused on this line, the northern line that goes into Aroostook County, and they're watching things spin up along the line. When you have severe thunderstorms, you got a couple of different modes. You can have discrete supercells, so all by themselves, so you can have a line like this in which things can be rotating along it. Now we look at velocity here. We're trying to look for a couplet, as we just talked about a few minutes ago. Typically what you're looking for within reason is red and green next to each other. There are variations of that, but that will often show you rotation. You can see, much like the one we watched towards Clayton Lake, it had its moment of decent rotation. It doesn't look like there's a ton going on with it at the moment. Let's bring Ryan in for a second so we can talk about this a little bit. We've got this here. We had a couple that come through here. It's not, you know, perfect. It's a little something there.
Yeah, and Keith, important thing to note here, this is the North Woods. It's very rural Piscataquis County, so there isn't much cell service here. It's a lot of camping areas, recreational areas. So this is a heads up for people who are perhaps at some of the cabins there and camping and things like that. But there aren't a lot of populated areas here, a lot of logging areas up in this direction too. So it's not like we can point out, you know, specific streets and whatnot as to where this is heading, because if we go back to the radar, as Keith was talking about, it really is just super rural up in this direction. This is where the rotation is right now, and looking at some of the mapping here, you know, there are several. It looks like they've actually just dropped it, which is good, Keith. Yeah. But that gives us an opportunity just to talk about some of the other warnings. They did just issue a new one for Aroostook County, and Keith, on this warning they put in a mention that a tornado is possible, which, to your point, there could be a little spin up along this line as it moves east. And this line is going into more populated areas, moving east toward places like Presque Isle.
Yeah, and the other thing about it being a not populated area, just because of where it's sitting here, is we're not getting amazing sampling from the radar. So we talk about our different radar locations. It's not a blind spot, but as you get away from the radar, it goes up in elevation. The beam just goes up in elevation. And so you start sampling some higher levels of thunderstorms as opposed to the lower ones, even on the lowest tilt, and that gets a little tricky to ascertain. Yeah, let's zoom in on this, Ryan, and take a look at this. So what now? This is kind of an idiosyncrasy that only us nerds ever talk about. So you have a tornado warning. Everybody knows what that is, and it means that you should take shelter. But within that, Ryan, you do have severe thunderstorm warnings where they can put, we call it TOR possible, which means that they're not convinced enough for a tornado warning, but they just want to put it out there to meteorologists that there could be rotation in here. Yeah,
and also for folks at home, it's just heads up, this is maybe like a higher end severe thunderstorm warning too. So I'll put a tracker on this, Keith. It looks like this line in particular is moving east at about 30 miles per hour. So tracking out from where it is now and where it's heading. In the next half hour or so, that would put it toward Ashland at 5:09, and if it holds together, this line gets closer to Caribou around 5:30. So heavy rain, there is thunder and lightning, potential for damaging winds of 60 miles per hour. Not much of a hail threat today. And Keith, we'll just have to see if there's any small spin-ups. I'll switch it to velocity, and it looks like there is one actually.
Right there, it looks pretty good. Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. You're right. It's now leaving the Allagash area and it's going farther east, so there will be more people in here. So now this is one of those games where National Weather Service is looking at the same thing. Just a reminder that we do not issue tornado warnings or severe thunderstorm warnings, and so we would have to wait for the National Weather Service to do this. I would say, though, that this
almost a stronger looking couplet
yes.
than the one that we had
took the
previously.
Word, yes, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Let's loop this back and just see what it looked like. And again, this is still pretty rural area. Sure. But yeah, in the last scan, it at least has come together. We'll have to see if that continues. Sometimes there can be a faulty scan mixed in there, but that particular couplet has me a little bit more concerned than what we saw in the first warning. And you can see there actually is a little bit of a hook there with a lot of lightning in that spot.
So sometimes, to Ryan's point, sometimes you get these echoes and you look at the velocity, but then when you look at the reflectivity like this, it doesn't look right, if that makes sense. And so we're down here, just, can we go back on camera just real quick? Just want to point this out. Sorry, I know we end up with weird stuff like that, but right in here, typically along these lines, you would expect a tornado to sit like this. So curl within these lines. So you got a couple little nubs out here, and that's where you would look for one. And the tornado warning before, I believe, Ryan, was on the north side, and that was kind of strange to me because it's not impossible, but it's certainly not how they typically will orient themselves if the line is moving to the north and east. Usually your shear gets in here and it spins it. So that right there, I'm surprised that we haven't seen that yet. Yeah,
we'll put a track on this. It looks like it's moving to the northeast. This is, there we go. Yeah. So there's the tornado warning in that exact spot we've been talking about. Round Mountain within about 10 or 15 minutes. Portage Lake, 5:27, and then Nixon, 5:35. This is moving somewhat to the northeast, it looks there. Sometimes they can bend to go a little bit more to the right, though.
Yep.
And that is a new tornado warning. We'll put that up until 5 o'clock for this section of Aroostook County.
So that's a perfect example, too, of how the National Weather Service is looking at the radar the same way we are. And I bet, Ryan, they were waiting for, as you just talked about, one more scan of that. Because sometimes you can have these scans, and it's actually really common out towards Sebago Lake where you have like 2 gnarly scans, and then it goes away. And so it was just maybe a brief rotation, and I bet they were waiting for an extra scan to put that tornado warning on there. But it looks like, again, that makes sense right there, and there's a few other little spots like that are popping out of this line, and so probably this whole line has to be watched. It's interesting, too, because this is not really where I think of these happening as much. It's not really the spot.
And the setup today, Keith, there's a warm front kind of that's lifted north of Aroostook County. So there is a little bit more low-level spin there. And you and I were talking earlier today, the cloud bases are kind of low to the ground on these really humid days.
Right.
I do want to point out, just looking at where this potential tornado is going, again, we don't have any confirmation. This is based on the radar. Right now it is in a pretty rural area, but it's headed toward the area of Portage Lake and Route 11. So that would kind of be the next area where there could be a more sizable population. And if it were to get there, it would be closer to about 5:30. But again, right now it's in a really rural spot. But that said, this time of the year you have people hiking, camping, and I would think at least they knew of the threat of thunderstorms and could see this line coming in. But this isn't anything to be out recreating in for sure, Keith.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because often we don't get very long track situations here, so it's almost hard to put trackers on these until we get really close, especially as they're spinning up along this front. Can we go to the reflectivity? I'm sorry, the velocity again. I'd just like to see if that couplet is. Yeah, it's still there. It's still pretty good. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Your point too, Ryan, is they drew this tornado warning in the same direction the entire line is moving, but a lot of times it is a little bit on the south end of the general line movement if you do have one on the ground.
Right, and to your point about the couplet here, there is pretty decent motion one way and motion another way, and that's the radar seeing, rotating winds within the storm, and that's why they triggered the warning. But yeah, it wouldn't shock me if this does track pretty close to Round Mountain. If it goes right on that northeast side, it would go to the northwest of it. But if you do know anybody at Round Mountain or in that area, again, there aren't many populated towns here, but that would be the area. And you can kind of see, just expanding the map, Ashland, Portage Lake, Eagle Lake next up if it were to make it all the way to Route 11. Keith, I think it's a good idea just to kind of reset and give everybody across the whole state an idea of what's going on, because this is northern Maine is where the real severe weather concern is right now, but we're watching some storms that are much weaker in other parts of the state.
Yeah, luckily, Ryan, to your point, that a lot of these down here actually look like they're losing steam in it. It looks like that northern part is a spot that's seeing the most severe weather, but certainly we had a lot of lightning, and it looks like we kind of hit that peak and a lot of them are dying out. We talked about this yesterday about now we're encountering that stable marine air into the mid-coast, into down east Maine too, so that's that onshore flow. And you can see it with the lightning tracker where it goes from these really kind of explosive thunderstorms out towards Sebago, and then it hits that more stable marine air and it basically dies out. So there might be more back here, but I do think it'd probably be hard to get a bunch of severe weather in there. We do have some non-severe storms out into the kind of the western Western Mountains here. Same situation, Strong, Farmington, where these are non-severe. There's just a lot of lightning with them. So we've got, if we zoom out farther, Ryan, is there anything back here? Because I know the models had indicated a second line, potentially 7 o'clock or so.
Yeah, there's some development up around Burlington, Vermont, and into upstate New York. So that could make it into New Hampshire, and we'll have to just see if it can kind of cross the border. But I think along the coast, as you mentioned, we've got this southerly wind. The odds for anything severe at the coast are very, very low. It's really western and northern Maine where that potential is a bit higher.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get this stuff in there. And I would imagine, too, this is kind of the actual front. So that's the air mass change. Might have a few showers and storms around it, but a lot of it will be there. So the main area that we're watching off that reset is up here where we've got that tornado warning, which is inside a severe thunderstorm warning box 2. And this is a pretty prolific lightning maker as well. Now, just quickly, I want to touch on the fact that this is considered radar indicated because we don't have any ground truth, meaning nobody has seen a tornado. And so what happens here is we can look at it and say, that's a good couplet, and it is. It's a good rotation couplet, but sometimes what we're seeing is the whole thunderstorm rotating, and it could be that the whole thunderstorm is rotating, but it's not actually dropping a tornado to the ground. We can't sample down to that level. To Ryan's point, though, anything that would hit today is really low based, and so it's obscured in Maine anyways, especially in this area where there's a ton of trees, and it being low base means it could probably realistically come around the corner on you pretty quickly, right? You know, this is not something you're going to see.
And with this being kind of embedded in a line of rain and thunderstorms, this isn't kind of the classic tornado you'd think of out in the plains where you get a big vantage point of it. There's a lot of rain surrounding it. So this is one of those cases where you probably don't see it until maybe you're close to or in it. And granted, we've talked about the fact that this is very rural area up here right now, but if it holds together, there's Route 11, Portage Lake, Eagle Lake. That would be the areas north of Ashland, where if this holds together in the next half hour or so, it may make it. And Keith, as I go back to you, I'll put up one more tracker here and see if we can pick up a few places. So Portage Lake, 531.
Yeah, and so I have to admit, I'm not even familiar with Buffalo, but it's 536. And so this is all moving northeast. And what's interesting too, Ryan, when you were having that conversation about it being rain wrapped, especially from the north, there's another conversation here about, and this is kind of slightly inside baseball, but it gets that way when we start talking about these systems. You know, Ryan, when people, when they pursue tornadoes, when they storm chase, one of those rules is to be on the south side if you can, because they call it core punching. If you come down from the north and you're coming through that rain, the lightning, the hail, and then you come out on the other side and there's a tornado right there. And so this is a similar situation where there is a lot of lightning and rain around it. So the south side, you'd come in and you probably, in some cases, you don't even get rain before you'd get that mesocyclone through, or potentially a tornado. We don't know if it's on the ground or not. But my point is, it wouldn't necessarily be in the middle of a thunderstorm for you, right? If it's approaching, what was that? Was that Round Mountain you mentioned?
Yes, Round Mountain.
Like you could potentially get just a few sprinkles, and then this thing would come through. There's not a lot of lightning. You'd hear it. You'd hear the thunder and lightning. But look at it. I mean, you're still dry there, and this thing, if it is on the ground, is very, very close. I'm just reminding people of that because I think there's this misconception if you've luckily never been very close to a tornado, that you would have some big thunderous storm before it, and most often that is not the case. It is on the south side like this.
Right. Yeah, so as we see it now, Keith, there is still a pretty decent couplet in there, which means the storm is rotating. Again, we don't have any confirmation of a tornado at this point, but if you're in a place like Portage Lake, or you happen to know anybody who's in this area, send them a text, give them a call. There certainly is cell service around Ashland, and I would think there's some around Portage Lake. Once you get outside of there, though, as you know, this is very, very rural territory where there's a lot of summer recreating, but you don't really have much way to communicate in some of these areas once you get into rural Aroostook County.
Yeah, and you're only going to get pinged on your cell phone, by the way, automatically if you're within this polygon. So if you're out in this zone, it usually will not ping you. I think, Ryan, maybe the right thing to do here is we'll punt back to news for a bit, keep an eye on this, and as it moves into maybe more populated areas, we might want to come back around to it.
Agreed, yeah. And just a note for everybody else, that's really the only area in the state with severe weather right now. It's Aroostook County. Everywhere else is just a few showers. So we'll send it back to the anchors.
All right, guys, and as both Keith and Ryan indicated, this is kind of radar indicated data they're looking at. So if you do see something, or you see an image of rotation where you are, you can certainly send it our way and let us know what you're seeing there. Your News at 4 will be back in just a moment.
The team you trust. News Center Maine at 11.